red light?
Like a good plan?
Because the fire was right there, like, you know, the house was right across the street.
Oh.
Huge fire, 2 trucks pouring water on it. They won, it was a senior year.
Oh my gosh.
Like, all our friends were watching those like pictures for us.
Oh.
Did you step over it all, Lori?
At the rubber set?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's-
Bob and
so I
I
didn't know where you
were
went.
together.
Were you there Sunday?
Yeah, yes. Oh, I'm so confused. Yes, we're there Sunday. So, yeah. And Bob was going over there tonight after work to see if there was any, because usually he helps big furniture. Oh, that's good.
All right, no, I would.
Absolutely.
Just sitting there?
You know, we love you.
Yeah. So somebody just left their donation there at the door? Oh, my goodness.
Maybe like 3 and 4.
I was gonna, I've been working over there. I love taking something this convention.
Great.
I am.
Yes, I did.
Oh, goodness.
He's not on my Lauren's house.
Caroline, how are you?
Yeah, I
How's life been happening? I know, it's nice when it's not. Trust me, it makes it, I totally understand that whole construction. Yeah, more spice on it, yeah.
I saw
I'd like me to skip it.
Hi, Vanessa. Did you hear the
Yeah, I hear about them. I don't get to use them.
Thanks for being here.
I won't say I don't get to use them.
I just wanted to say hi. How are you? It's so good to see you.
I know,
Ask lots of questions.
So this was what happened, right? And we were thinking that every Friday. So then you take it to watch
Well, we still have to talk. I would love that. I would love that. You're next. You're still around? Yeah. I would love that. I would love that. So great. Thanks again. Thank you for coming
I don't know. I wouldn't leave my purse out in the building and leave it for 4 or 5 hours. So, what I just want to touch my Yeah, yeah.
Okay, if I can have your attention, I know some of you are still signing in, but we can use our list here, right, while we're waiting. So just kind of walk you through our plan for tonight. You know, as soon as the board meeting is called to order, we will begin with the first of our second round interviews. When you came to the sign-in table, you would have seen, of course, an agenda. There were also feedback forms. So again, like we did last time, I'm going to want to collect those feedback forms after each of the interviews. And again, I want to encourage those of you who have a habit of taking copious notes. This is not the time for copious notes, right? do that on the back of the form. On the front of the form, what we want is those high-level things that you want to share with the board, those most salient points, because they're going to have a lot of information that they need to go through before they get to deliberation tonight. Also, what was over here, and if you didn't get it, I'm happy to pass them out in the audience, are little quarter sheet question forms. So the last 15 minutes of each conversation tonight, we will dedicate to audience questions. You don't have to ask the question. You will write it on the designated form. I will review it, make sure that it's legal and not repetitive, and then our board president will read them as time allows, okay? So any questions from any of our audience members about what to expect this evening before we get going? No question, all right. So we'll get started in just a minute then. Does anybody need question forms or a feedback form? Okay, let me get those.
It's the only way we get great. Hold on, he gets it towards the end. Which did you need?
Skip the back.
I hear you. So there's a couple of these. Do you need a two? Yes, please. All right. So there's a couple, and then we can always replenish between the reviews.
All right.
All right, we call the Board of Education meeting to order. And this time we'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll call security halls. So we are ready to do our round 2 interviews for the next superintendent of the Waterford School District. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I think it's a great show of community support to have so many people here. This is a huge decision that will affect all of us. So we certainly appreciate it. What you'll do with the feedback forms, and we will be able to take a look at that tonight after the interviews. And with that, we will start our first candidate, Dr. Catherine Cost, Superintendent of the Wyandotte School District. She should be coming in here in just a moment.
Please welcome Dr. Catherine Cost.
Hello, everybody. Hello
Okay,
again.
hello again. Well, Dr. Cost, we certainly want to welcome you back. And we'll start with today. You had an opportunity to tour our district and visit some of our buildings and visit with some of our stakeholders. Can you tell us about your day and kind of what stood out for you about your day?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me back. I was honored to be able to come and see the district. But I also know that there's some wonderings, and so I wanted to just address you and the audience about those. And being a leader, a lot of times there's some difficult decisions to be made. And sometimes those are very hard. When I was a principal, I non-renewed a probationary teacher and worked with legal counsel, had to support my superintendent and support the board, but it ended up in court. And that was hard, not only for me, but also the department, but it absolutely was the right thing to do, and I would do that all over again if I had the choice, because I know it's that important to have a great teacher in front of students each and every day. fast forward to now, there was a board meeting where an individual came, and I had not met that person ever before, but during public comment, shared a number of inaccuracies. And by the end of the week, it became the talk of the town. So I chose to get in front of it because it was a big distraction. And so I got in front of it and communicated with our families and our staff and had the support of the school board. My hope was to put this to rest by giving people accurate information, and that's in fact what happened. By Monday, we were focused on teaching and learning, which is what needed to happen. So I bring this up because those decisions that I make sometimes are hard, but I always check with my school board, legal counsel when needed, because there's too much at stake now. So I wanted to put some context into some of those wonderings and let people in the community know, as well as some of you know, about decisions that leaders have to make at some point. So today was a whirlwind, but it afforded me the opportunity to get a feel for the leaders in your district, as well as the students and the opportunities they get to embrace. I started with Stefanski and the early childhood and got 5 hugs. So that was a great start to my day. We were growing and measuring grass, and they were so excited to share that with me. So that's how it started. Darren was a faithful driver. He navigated his way around some potholes. And was just very, very much a great host, and I want to say thank you to him. But he took me to Cooley Elementary, and Mike told me about their writing initiative. I told Mike I was like taking notes to take that back to my own principals, because that initiative is just really, really spectacular, and the results have been phenomenal. Pierce Elementary, I met Yvonne and learned about hydroponics and technology, and I think to myself, as a middle school student, how engaging that school and that environment is. I went to Kettering next and got a chance to talk to some of the link leaders. What was fabulous is Deb, Nick, and Shelley talked about their perspective of what high school is like. But then to hear it from the students and hear things like family and community and of their support, that told me that students feel welcome, they feel excited, they feel loved, and that's so important as a high school student. From there, we went to Beaumont, and I had some Leader in Me students do a presentation all by themselves. They synergized to do that presentation and really highlighted some of their learnings and why it's important to them. After Beaumont came Kingsley Montgomery, and this was cute. A little young man, Anthony, when he was asked what would be important for me to know, he said, everybody should have a raise. I went to Mott, and 2 female students showed me the house that they had wired, complete with a ceiling fan, which gave them extra credit. And we talked about why it didn't work in the first place, and they mentioned they didn't have all the same type of bulbs, and they were very good at explaining their learning. Durant, Craig talked about the partnerships and why that was so important for those students, like Michigan Works, and how those students have really increased in their graduation rates, and he was so proud. I ended my day with Val at Houghton, and that school has had so much growth in their reading and math. It's just phenomenal. So all of those experiences just gave me an insight into how much the community supports the schools. The facilities are incredible. And then seeing some of the construction of gyms at the elementaries and what some of those gyms look like, when they're done. It is so evident that the community is really behind wanting students to have a great place to learn. The number of programs available to students struck me as just phenomenal, and the pride that really this whole organization holds. So I had a wonderful day. I stole a lot of things that I'm going to take back to my own district to suggest. And so it is really giving me an insight into Waterford.
Well, what we're going to do, in case you don't know, is have a conversation. We all have some questions. There's no set order that we're going to go. Obviously, everybody will have that opportunity, but unlike last week, where we just kind of went around, it's going to be, if somebody has a question, ask. If somebody wants to follow up, they'll ask, and we'll just have a chat. So with that, I'll open it up to any board member who'd like to start out. John Paul.
Thank you, Dr. Cross, for being here today. So my question is, it's about diversity. So what is your definition of diversity? And how would you work to promote it amongst Waterford students and staff?
So I have been in 3 diverse districts. Troy and Farmington are rather similar to the diversity here. So there could certainly be cultural diversity, there could be religious diversity, there could be gender identification diversity, there could be ethnic, religious. So there are many facets of that. Sometimes people think it might just be the color of someone's skin, but I think there's very this day and age, it's so important, especially for young people, that they feel included in a part of their learning environment, and that they have a place, and they have an adult that they can identify with. Now that adult, I think it may not be an issue of that might not be the same religion or the same culture, but that adult might listen, that adult might be a problem solver, might be someone that can offer advice. So I think diversity happens on many forefronts. How do you build it? I think in looking at some of the key values of schools today, respect, respecting one another, the Link leaders, they represented all sorts of walks of life from high school. Clearly there were the children you would expect to see, but then there were also the non-traditional children in that room. So it's I think a culture of respect, it's educating, and being able to have adults on that same level of understanding of students.
Jim?
I know that you've done some research on Waterford and certainly appreciate the magnificent tour that you took today. And it's wonderful you had a chance to get a feel for our community and our schools, our amazing schools. In your last interview, we did learn a little bit about your experience with right-sizing a district. I'm wondering if you could describe what your approach would be to determining how to right-size the Waterford School District, and then go about that planning process.
So the information I have, and it's just from people that I've talked to today, spoke about the number of students that Waterford has lost. They spoke of the desire to perhaps not move forward with school choice based on where it is right now. So if that's the case, then I think we need to take a hard look at how are we spending money. So if a school could be closed, and I realize a savings of like $1 million a year, the question would be, is it worth it? Sometimes schools are in bad physical shape, but yet I know the bond has put a lot of resources into all of the schools. So that might not be a determining factor at this point. There is a cost to closing a neighborhood school, and is it worth that $1 million? So I think your question was about a process. So I think the board members and I need to look at community values. We need to hear community input. We need to look at financial reports to see, is there really a savings? You know, we think there might be, but all of a sudden, if you're busing students further, that might be more of a cost than if you had left them in your home district. We have to look at things and what do you do with that property? You know, is it something we need to sell, or in the long term, do we expect growth down the road, we want to save it? There's questions about staffing. What do you do with an extra, 20 teachers, 50 teachers? What do you do with an extra secretary? What do you do with maintenance, principal? How do those dynamics fit? Because if that $1 million savings really isn't $1 million savings, then the question is it right to do it? So I think us, the 8 of us, having a hard look at all those facets that go into, should we close a school, more than one school, redistricting, then getting community thoughts and input, that's going to start guiding the process we have to say, are we okay right now as we are? Or do we need to make some different decisions down the road? If it is, we need to make some different decisions, and we are not right-sized, then we have to identify a process of how we go about that. Some districts, for example, Grosse Pointe is going through this right now. Grosse Pointe had a citizens committee make different recommendations, and now they're going out to feedback to the community on those different recommendations. Other districts see it as the board's job to come up with recommendations, then go forward to the community. So there's different ways of doing it. We can talk and tailor it if we need to go that route. I think something we need to consider are short-term needs as well as long-term needs. We know that birth rates right now are not increasing, so short-term, that might not change where we are right now. But long-term, what are those ramifications? So it is a complex answer.
Kind of feed off of that question. I know that you have school choice in your district earlier. What are your thoughts on how you do school choice?
That is a difficult subject.
That's what I'm asking you.
So one of your neighboring communities thrives on school choice, but it's around 45%. And there are questions about, is that too high? And what does that do to the community where you have 45% students coming from outside that community in? For that community, it seems like that's where they are, and that's good. That, from what I know of Waterford, is not the ideal state. So I go back to Grosse Pointe. Grosse Pointe decided they did not want to do school choice, which meant they weren't going to get additional students. So then they were forced with making decisions about closing schools. From my own community, we have seen our student enrollment increase. Some of that are people, families coming to homes, which is what I love. That's what I want. I want families moving into the community. But our school of choice numbers have also increased. And what I have learned from working with that board is it's finding the balance. Where are you comfortable? Now I believe you do kindergarten. And maybe that is a good place based on how the community feels, how you all feel, and that's okay. The other side of that coin is the only way a school district gets revenue right now is by increasing enrollment. And And so if school of choices isn't an option that is one that's productive for the district right now, then what are other options to bring families to Waterford? So I don't think there's a number. I think it depends on the community, all of you, and then finding the right balance for the district.
So I'm wondering, excuse me, in the past, what's worked for you in previous districts and how you might bring that approach here in terms of collaboration with the different sectors within the district, administration, leadership, teachers, students, how do you involve students in kind of a strategic plan in moving forward and determining what the needs are of the district? Do you have a specific approach or how would you go about that?
So what struck me when you were asking the question is, how do you involve stakeholders in kind of a strategic plan for the district? And I think that's very important, and I really was happy to have all of you at the gathering that we just had, because some of you came to me with thoughts and ideas, different ways of maybe approaching the work. And something I know about Waterford from being here today is that this is a very tight-knit community. Families stay, children come back, and I think the benefit of that is the investment people have in the school district. They want to be a part. There are voices that want to give their ideas. So in terms of developing a strategic plan or where Waterford is going and what goals are and what's important, I think tapping into all those voices that have such a vested interest. Look at the audience tonight, it's phenomenal to have all of you. You could be doing a lot of things on Tuesday night, and you're here. And so getting those voices, be it staff member voices, community member voices, you brought up students. I don't think I involve elementary students, but certainly high school students have a vested interest. I would not leave out alumni, because they're experiencing, what we hope they would do next. Parents, I believe I said staff, administrators, all of those perspectives can add to what are the goals, what are we working towards, what are we providing students, and coming up with a plan to do so. Thank you.
This is a question about instruction. Describe your view of growth versus achievement, and should the board pay attention to both or one over the other? And how do you have the board informed of our students' growth and student achievement data? What's your process?
So we had a workshop about that very same thing because it's so difficult to wrap your arms around. So I'll give you an example. Our students in Wyandotte meet their growth goals. So they grow a year's time in a school year. And that could be on a WEA, it could be things like MSEP, and we look at reading and math. And that is what also our teacher evaluations and administrator evaluations and my evaluation is measured on growth. So how much a child learns in a given period of time. Where it can be deceiving is that if you have a second grader coming in, let's say reading 2 grade levels below, and you say, oh, well, that second grader grew a year's growth in a year's time, that second grader is still going to be behind once that second grader gets to 3rd grade. So growth is a measure of, and it's important that we look at it, but that also, I think, lends itself to the dynamic of proficiency. Are they meeting a target they need to meet? And that's a hard thing to to get your arms around if this is not part of your day-to-day conversation. It's hard for our teachers, it's hard for our administrators. So it, I believe it's important for our principals and our teachers and parents to know about a growth goal, but also a proficiency target. Because that way we're closing gaps and having students have their college readiness skills by the time they're in 11th grade. So compound that with the state says we need 3 years of data for growth. And if you have a teacher who's taught 5th grade, 4th grade, and 3rd grade, that's the past 3 years, you've got 3 different groups of students. And WEA is, we can tie that into machine data, how we get that data as well. So another layer to this conversation is over time. You know, do you have schools, do you have classrooms making great growth and great proficiency over time, consistently? And then how do you share those methods with other schools or other teachers or other teams? So an answer to your question is both. And I think it's important that we have targets and we measure them, and it's a way to say, are we doing right by our students, or are we not using resources, or are we not hitting the marks that we've set for ourselves? So I would envision working with principals to look at those targets, and then working with all of you, it might be, you know, fall, winter, spring, to say, are we meeting the needs of our students?
As superintendent of the Waterford School District, describe how you would retain teachers and improve staff morale.
So part of my day-to-day was meeting with union leaders, and this was a big part of our conversation. It's been hard because of funding issues. I know that Waterford attracts and retains teachers because they just love it here. But yet it's hard because they're having to get 2 jobs, 3 jobs maybe, if that is the case. I believe that impacts morale. Yet the other side of the coin is a fund balance. And making sure we have resources and we're spending that money on our goals. We talked about achievement goals or proficiency goals or growth goals. We also have to put our budget where we think is most important. I don't think it's a surprise to any of you that I think the number I heard today was over 100 teachers have left for other districts. And that could be because of money and lack of pay increases. It could be because of morale. It could be maybe their spouse moved. But I think that is going to be something that is going to be important to consider. How do we go about a pay structure? How do we go about building morale? Because I don't think morale is based on just a paycheck or a pay increase. There are other intrinsic ways. Matter of fact, Daniel Pink says paying somebody more is not a motivator. The reason somebody works harder is because they believe in the work. And so that's a cultural issue that we need to get our arms around. How do you make people feel valued? And so in thinking about how do you attract and retain good teachers, I was talking, I think this young lady here, this is her, she's student taught, and then was hired before the end of the year, and she's here. How do we keep her here? How do we find out what is important to her beyond money? How do I work with you and our business office to decide how much a fund balance is needed? How do we build that into our budget? How do we negotiate it? How do we treat all groups fairly? So that one group doesn't have a lion's share. And it's some work that I feel needs to be a priority as we move forward.
Dr. Cost, the current board that we have here over the last year and a half, we've had some difficulties, sometimes some disagreements, and I think everybody's aware of that. One of the biggest things I think is there's a difference of opinion of what is micromanaging and what is oversight. If selected, how would you plan on working with this board and also the individual board members? So that cannot be a problem. We can move forward positively. And then also, what do you feel is the role of a school board member?
That's a great question. And you're not alone. Right now in education, it is just hard. It is hard because of budget issues, it's because of things like the third grade reading law. So this board is no different than many other boards who have wrestled with things. I am aware that MASB is able to provide workshops so that the 8 of us can focus on, first and foremost, I would focus on how do we do our business together, meaning, is this something we want lots of workshops and time for you to understand? Is it you want me to meet with you one-on-one and share data? So we are going to need to find out how we work as a group of 8 people. MASB can help us do that. And it would start with how norms. How do we treat each other? How do we deal with conflict? What do we do to hold each other accountable to what we said we were going to do? So the first step in answering your question, I would see us going through a workshop like that. That sets the stage for how we work together, how we treat each other, how we communicate with each other. Followed by another workshop MASB can do is what is the role of the board and what is the role of the superintendent, and build a common understanding of how we will approach that. So, theoretically, the role of a board is to develop policy and hire a superintendent. But we all know that you are the eyes and ears of our community, and you have a vested interest of the decisions that happen, and you need to know that you're making them in good faith. And so that can be things like how much information do you need, and when do you need it? What happens if you feel like you need more? What happens if you hear something in the community? How is that get addressed? So really it's stepping back and defining how we do our work and then what is the work.
Waterford's fund balance is once below 2%, goes down around 10. There are different opinions on if we should continue to grow it to 10% or higher, as our auditor has suggested. And you've told us that you have 16.5% fund balance. So why is it so high? What are the pros and cons of that? And what are your initial thoughts about what Waterford should do?
So, where I am, there was, 10 years ago, there was a big decline in enrollment. And it caught everybody off guard. And it meant layoffs, it meant combining classes at odd times, eliminating elective. It was awful. It was awful. So, it's funny because our auditors say you should have a 15% fund balance. And we all go, that's a lot. So our fund balance, we purposely, it's the feel of the board that they want to protect themselves. Last year it was 18%. And so we were able to do a $1 million spend down list. So we collected needs of the schools and said, if we have $1 million, what would you need? And it was crazy things like diving blocks for a pool that hadn't been replaced. Diving boards. It could have been, we need more smart projectors in classrooms. And so it was nice to be able to give back because I don't think the fund balance should be there, sitting and earning money. I think it should be going back to the classrooms. So they target, my current board targets 15%, but that's because of where they've been. Transition now to Waterford. Certainly, we do not want to be under 5%, but I think we need to have a conversation of where are you comfortable. The other thing is that Wyandott's enrollment is it fluctuates, it can. And so that's something that's a bit of an outlier. I don't know that to be true of Waterford. And so that might not be an issue we have to deal with. But I think the question is, what is our target fund balance? And then communicating why. Because we have staff members who say, well, if you have 7% fund balance, we should be getting some of that. And we haven't had raises in 8, 9 years. Yeah, there may be good reasons to say, we need a fund balance of 7% because we've got this coming up, this coming up, this coming up, this coming up. And talking to Darren, he was talking about the smart projectors needing to be refreshed at some point. Well, what's the long-term plan for that? And so I think about certainly the physical capability of the physical plants are in great shape. What are the technology needs? Do you have a large textbook adoption? Do you have a lot of students who are going to need biology textbooks or Algebra 1 textbooks? Those are huge. And so looking ahead at where the major expenditures are going to be, looking at our priorities, and then making sure that we're spending money where those priorities are.
So we know that for some students, academics are not necessarily the strongest part of their day or the most exciting part of their day. And for some of them, sports or the arts or robotics, or there's just some other kind of niches that they fit into. And I wonder if you can talk maybe just a little bit about your experience within that and your perspective on making those priorities.
One of the high school students said to me, there's something here for everyone. And I believe what that meant is that there is such an array of either fine arts, STEM, robotics, opportunities for folk tech, leadership, that all, and there's probably some I don't even know about, those draw students in and give them a niche, give them a purpose, like you said. It's not, it may be, it might not be the core academic classes, it might be some of those elective classes. And so in looking at the number of programs you offer, I really believe that there is a place for every child here. They can find a niche, and it might be a sports team, it might be a club, it might be an elective, it might be band, any of those things. This community offers such a wide range of opportunities. It's refreshing to see. It really was. So I think the question might be, how do we continue to meet the needs of students in that way? The performing arts centers, oh my word, that was so nice to go into. And there was a quartet practicing in the hallway outside those doors. And how do we continue to be able to do that? How do we make that something where, 10 years ago, who knew robotics was going to be where it is right now? And so how do we continue to refresh and make sure we're providing students with those opportunities? Thank you.
What do you see as the single most important issue with faced here in the Waterford School District over the past year? I take into consideration when you're just getting to know the Waterford School District. But based off of what you've learned today, the research and background in Waterford, what would be the single most important issue facing this?
there are strong communities within Waterford, and it might be neighborhoods, it might be schools, it might be groups of employees, it might be teams. I'm not so sure that everybody is working in concert within all those different communities. Meaning, I don't know if everybody understands the same vision. That would start with each of us. What is our vision? What do we stand for? What are we prioritizing? Then do those different communities understand that vision? Are spending patterns aligned with that vision? Are goals that we're working on aligned with that vision? Are we holding people accountable to that vision? So it starts, I think, with bringing all those different community groups in line so that we all have an understanding of why we're doing what we're doing and why it's important.
Piggyback on that question.
Please do.
Just if we could kind of continue going down that same thought process relative to managing vision and purpose. Can you tell me about a time when you managed, when you were part of a group or you managed a group that was headed one way and you felt that they needed to be going in a different direction? And kind of expound on how you approached that, what your thinking was, and what the results were?
So, Wyandotte was part of a Wayne County enhancement village, which provided $1.2 million every year for the next 6 years. And in deciding, prior to the vote, how we were going to use those funds, we had a lot of ideas. Do we hire, do we lower class sizes? Do we renovate a field? Do we add a cafeteria to a school? All those sorts of things. And there were no strings attached. So with this money, it could go to staffing, it could go to buildings, grounds, it could go to technology, it could go to whatever. And so we had some board workshops where we were talking about what we could do with that money. What struck me is some decisions and some conversation that was happening were not in line with the goals that we had set for ourselves. So one example would be, we had a goal of giving every student a Chromebook or an iPad. And we originally were looking at 2020 if we needed to do that. Some ideas were not in line with the other, and let me back up. Even a greater goal was increasing our student achievement, K-12. And so when we started talking about adding a cafeteria to an elementary school, while that solved some other problems, it wasn't in line with our most important work, which is raising achievement and helping students be engaged. So providing insight back to the goals that we were working on, talking about if we were to repurpose this, how it would further, so it's instead of 2020 meeting that goal of being one-to-one with Chromebooks, at the end of the school year, all of our students K-12 will have Chromebooks. So we were able to kind of redirect the conversation, refocus it into our vision, the goals we'd already established, and weigh if we were to use this money a different way, would it get us there faster? And so ultimately, that's what we decided. What the board decided.
What potential concerns do you have about this position?
There's some big shoes to fill. There are. In talking to the administrators today, they are doing some great work in their schools. I want to be able to empower them to continue that great work, remove barriers in their day, so that they truly can allow classrooms to do what they need to do. So, I don't want them to think that if, or anybody, if I come in, there's going to be sweeping changes, because that's not what's going to be. I will work shoulder to shoulder with them. We're going to sit down and see where they've been, where they think they need to go, and make a plan. So, I don't think that's a challenge, but I know it's a fear. You know, with any person at the top changing, there's an opportunity for things to change quite a bit, and that is not my leadership style, and I wouldn't do that. I will be quite honest, my work is going to be working with all of you in how we effectively govern this district as a team with cohesion and being able to roll up our shirt sleeves and do the hard work that's before us.
Dr. Crosby, you talked a little bit about if you have a student teacher, a young teacher, and what we have to do to try to reach out to them, how to keep those people here. Unfortunately, we have lost a lot of teachers, very good teachers. And I think one of the biggest reasons is money. If they can go somewhere else and provide more for their family, they're doing that. But it's not always that. So how do you feel about an exit interview, face-to-face, one-on-one, or tell us everything. We want to know every single thing, why you're leaving this district to go somewhere else. That's kind of part A. And then part B, at least I think for all of us, but one of my biggest problems has been, from the time I've been on this board, is that we have so many families that still live right here in Waterford that choose to send their kids to Huron Valley, Clarkston, Walled Lake, West Bloomfield. I've always said, why aren't we literally showing up on their door and saying, talk to us, why are you leaving? What's the reason that you decide that Huron Valley or Clarkston is better fit for your child than Waterford? So what would be your thought about also an exit interview face-to-face, not a flyer in the mail or something? He literally has been here 5 or 6, 7 years, and now decides they're better off going to a neighboring district, yet they still continue to live right here.
I think both those things offer powerful opportunities. We may think we understand why a staff member might leave to go to Walled Lake, but once you drill down, you might not know exactly why. Maybe it's, I didn't like the grade level or the content I was teaching. Maybe it was my drive was too crazy. So unless we drill down, excuse me, unless we drill down, and one way to do that is the exit interviews with staff, we won't get to the root cause. If the root cause is truly money, all right, well then that's powerful information to have. Because then what we need to do to counter it. If it's a morale issue, that's even more insightful. Because if we're thinking if they need to be paid more, but really it's a morale issue, you're not getting to the root cause of why they're leaving. So the exit interviews would be able to do that. I think I would not be opposed to doing some of that. That would be a very telling thing. As far as families leaving, we had a situation where we had 125 families going to nearby Riverview. And I, for the life of me, couldn't figure out, why would you go to Riverview? They don't have turf fields, they don't have a music program, I didn't understand. So we started doing some phone calls this summer. We noticed that you're going to Riverview. Can you tell us more about that? And what we got was, I heard, well, they have a really good, something. And many times it was perception. It wasn't really real. So then we could do a better job of marketing. We could do a better job of telling our story. In the middle schools, we could talk about the band opportunities that we have, because there were were some misperceptions. So in doing something similar to that, we were able to recapture. So this last year, I think we only lost 72 out of 125. But again, it was because of doing some work with those families and getting information into their hands that they didn't otherwise have. So again, I think that's a powerful opportunity.
John Paul.
So, one of the things that we know about education is the classroom, the part of it at home as well. The parents, the families, the social and emotional supports. Waterford is a microcosm of America, is what a lot of people say about it in our front door of Waterford. We're a very diverse population, socioeconomic situations. So my question is, how would you improve social emotional supports and programming for kids here in Waterford?
So something I learned today was that there is a social worker in every elementary school. And I think part of those salaries are paid for by Title I funds. That is absolutely spectacular, to be able to have that resource in every elementary school. With the amount of trauma students are going through. And something I learned when I was at a workshop is divorce can be considered trauma. So if you have a first grade child and all of a sudden mom and dad are not together, for that child, that's traumatic. I always thought of trauma as a car accident or fire or something, egregious like that. But it really touches children in ways that go far beyond that. So I think about I'm not gonna name it correctly, but at Durant, there was a nurse support, a medical support.
Team health.
Say it again?
Team health center.
Team health center, things like that. How do you leverage that in some of, Kettering or Mott, or even in and again, it's what a great opportunity to provide supports, because children are coming to us with needs, and looking at the free and reduced lunch, making sure that that they're taking advantage of breakfast and lunch. There are ways to look at community donations to have meals at home on the weekends. Blessings in a backpack is an example of that. Increased availability after school, because sometimes children are going home to homes that are empty. How do you provide opportunities for them to stay in the same place that they know is their school? There are grants available for clubs. The YMCA partners provides things like Girls on the Run or Stride. And so, I don't know. I talked to a couple gentlemen at the meet and greet, and they also want to support if it's truancy. Why are students not coming to school? They need to be here. This is where, so how do we work with families to get students here? Vaping, incredible, through the roof. How do we encourage students to make good choices that way? Is it in health classes? Is it partnering? In Wyandotte, we have something called the Guidance Center. We partner with them, bring in psychologists once a week at our high school and middle school to work with youth that otherwise wouldn't get those services. So I think about the benefits of Waterford, and I know those organizations are there to help us continue to meet the social, emotional, mental needs of our students.
What are your plans to address our test scores, improve them in areas of curriculum that are lacking, especially in high school? What have you done
Our science scores were not increasing, and I'm talking 22% passed the proficiency half of our 11th graders. And so then going back and working with the science department, they believed they had it aligned with the science standards. And I think I talked about this in my prior interview. But it didn't get to the depth of knowledge, it didn't get to the level of rigor that it needed to. So in that case, we could be very specific about them missing out on some of the standards that they weren't teaching to students, so we could revise the curriculum and include them. So we could look at low science scores and then drill down and find out what was the reason for those science scores. And in our case, we were missing a quarter of the science standards. So no wonder our science scores are low. And then they changed. So what is a blessing is to have the number of instructional coaches as well as interventionists. That's a really good start to increasing teachers' proficiency, because again, like John Hattie says, the way to increase student achievement is to give teachers a wider bag of tricks. If you improve a teacher's ability to teach, you will increase student achievement. So those instructional coaches, those interventionists are critical to some of that. NWEA, and I'm not sure if it's given to high school students or not, what's great about the reports teachers can see is what areas students are growing and what areas they're not growing. So if you were to take a geometry teacher and they administer the NWEA, you can look at a math report and see what concepts did the majority of that class get and what concepts did the majority of that class not get. And so maybe it's something that a teacher just, said, I didn't know I was supposed to be spending as much time on 4-dimensional shapes. Or I was spending too much time on 4-dimensional shapes. And so I think building in ways for teachers and administrators to use data, which you're growing in proficiency. Talking to some of the leaders and teachers, that's coming along. It's coming along. But how do you help them use data to inform instructional practices so that we know what we're not doing a good job of teaching and how we change how we're teaching to meet the needs of those students? That is huge. It is huge. But I think about a teacher who's 40, they weren't trained in this way. That just was not part of how business was done. So in the last 7 years, this is a change. So it's going to take time, it's going to take resources, it's going to take working with local schools, partnering with other districts to say, how are you meeting the academic needs of your students? Think about Houghton Elementary is a great model for how they change their teaching practices to increase student achievement. So that's what's going to happen.
This just came to my mind, I did not prepare this question, but I'm just curious, we've all been working on questions and not really communicating with each other about it, and I'm wondering if there's anything that we're not asking you, that you wish we would ask you, that you maybe wanted to share with us about yourself or your experience, or, something you think is just really important for us to know about you, or your history and your perspective.
Thank you. So what comes to mind is just what makes me effective in what I do is I think because I'm a parent, I'm a mom, and so I see, 3 years ago, my children were bringing home word searches, and that about killed me. Word searches have a depth of knowledge of about 0. There is no instructional good that comes out of, I'll phrase this, a general education student doing word searches. I say that because I was in some special education classes today, they were doing word searches. That's appropriate. That's good. But for my children, that was not for, and so, did I march right in and say, stop doing word searches? No, but it allowed me conversations to have about, tell me why you're doing this. What did you hope would happen as a result of this? Are you getting results you want? And so being a parent, it gives me a lens that helps me in my day-to-day decision making. I think there is some hard work to be done here. The fact that I have been sitting in a current superintendent seat allows me to hit the ground running with all of you, meaning I don't have a learning curve of how this job needs to be done. I think I can step in and roll up my shirt sleeves and get to work right away. I am someone who develops relationships, and that is part of the work I do, because if there's a hard conversation to happen, that relationship allows that conversation to go much better. I told in August, we have all of our teachers and parents, everybody comes in, and I address them. And I told them that the reason that I do what I do is because I can make a difference. Like, I get up in the morning and I say, I'm going to make it better. And that's what drives me. And that's why I love what I do. So I would carry that same passion, that same integrity, that same work ethic, that same desire to make a difference here. And really, that's what's motivated me to put my hat in the ring. I'm in a district with 5,000 students. We've made a lot of progress. Now I have an opportunity to touch 8,000 students and make similar progress. And so that intrinsic value to me is what brings me to the table. And why I think it'd be a good fit.
Before a board member asks another question, I'm just going to prompt the audience that if you have a question you want to submit, now's the time to write it on that quarter slip of paper. And I'm going to be walking through the aisle to collect them. Thank you.
Over the past few years, we've expanded our academics program. So what are your ideas on programs and changes you would make here at a lot of these school districts that would improve upon the way we get our academics during the high level?
So I don't know if I know enough yet to answer your question, but here's some questions I would ask. I would look at your bottom 30% of students, and find out what needs they have in terms of growth. And are they students who learn traditionally, or do we need to wrap them into a non-traditional, more like a STEM environment, or robotics, or like hydroponics, for example? And talking to, I believe John was the teacher, he talked about he gets the hands-on kids who all of a sudden get a spark and just go. So I would start by looking at your bottom 30% and talk about how do we get them engaged in their learning. Because those are the at-risk, those are the students that I worry about not being able to move up proficiency fast enough. Is it things like elementary schools sometimes have maker spaces where, again, it's hands-on, you're learning about gear ratios, you're learning about series versus parallel circuits, those types of things. So would that be a draw? Do we need more books in children's hands? It wasn't called a bookmobile, sweet reads. Do we need to continue that and amplify that type of thing? If we need to get kids reading so that their test scores are higher. So it's I guess capitalizing on what we see the needs of students, and I just haven't delved into that enough to be more specific in the answer. there's opportunities, and I know that there's also a business owner at the meet and greet who desperately wants to partner. So there's an opportunity there that we could maybe bring something in or have students go and experience something else.
Tell me about a time when you maybe communicated something and then had to go back later and revise or change it, or when you maybe even just flat out made a mistake or was wrong at something. Have a specific instance where that occurred, and how did you approach it, and what was the result of that?
So I thought of two situations. One, this year, we went to texting families about snow days versus them getting robocalls. I thought it was a great idea because no one was getting a call at 11:30 at night or 5 in the morning. So my first text went out, school is closed, keep your children home. And so then I started getting messages about, well, what district is this in? I teach in a district, my husband teaches in another district, I've got kids in 2 districts, can you tell me which district this is coming from? And who are you? How do I know you're even like legit? So I learned quickly that what I had sent out was very vague, and I needed to be, this is Dr. Cross, school in Wyandotte will be closed tomorrow, you give a date, please check the website if you need more additional information, so that people could, get used to it. So that was one example. The other example is I was working with our administrators, and we looked at career and college readiness data, and I killed them. They were not ready for that. They left with a feeling of despair. I did not present it well. I did not couch it with, we're going to address this long term. They left feeling like they should go, jump off the cliff. And so, I recognized that after I got some questions. So I sent them all an email. I apologized. I said, that was not my intent to have you leave the way you left. We are going to backtrack in a couple of weeks. We're going to start small, and please accept my apology, because I had the opposite effect of what I had hoped I would have.
We're now going to ask some questions from our audience members. We'll start off with, how do you feel about bringing skilled trades classes back to the Waterford School District?
So it's interesting because the STEM program is, I believe, where the autos classes used to be, and that would, space is a challenge, money is a challenge. We've got, is it OTC? Yeah, so where students can go. Yeah. Are there a number of students who would want cosmetology here? And so I think, that ties into your question, Jonathan, about achievement. How do we know we're reaching all of our, I talked to a young man who said, this cost, I'll sit in biology if I get to go to autos. And then he literally was doing that. He would hold his breath through biology and keep his calm if he could go work in autos for 2 hours. And so I know there are students that need those types of classes. In Wyandotte, we've been able to, we have 6 programs. We have a program that works out of a hospital for medical experiences. We have autos, we have welding, we have metals, we have CAD, we have horticulture that's partnered with 1-800-Flowers. This was their first year of doing that, and so we have kids actually doing 1-800-Flowers for designs. But those are right situations for us. We have the space. We could see it as a way to keep students in their home school. So I'd be all about looking at that.
Our next question, teachers are struggling with extreme behaviors such as ESD, EI, and ASD. How will you help support teachers manage and instruct the fall class while also meeting the needs of these extreme behaviors?
And this is not something unique to Waterford by far. And so we've been dealing with it in looking at what can be done. So there's something called Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 interventions. So Tier 1 would be something that would be done with the whole class. So I think the first step is looking at Tier 1 interventions that a teacher would do with their class. An example would be our students are learning to self-regulate a little bit, be more aware of what they're doing and saying. So next year, in one school, every classroom is going to have a calming corner where students can go and, just have a timeout per se. So instead of going down to the office, that is one strategy that teachers can utilize with students. Another school is looking at having older mentors. We have a first grade student who we wonder if he is going to be designated as EI someday. But he has times where he needs to be out of that classroom. But if he goes and works with his fourth grade mentor, it's like hitting the reset button. And that would be another type of intervention. So what we have learned is that we are seeing more significant behaviors. We are seeing students who have psychological manifestations that we didn't used to see. So how do we utilize, first of all, the entire staff to help with that? Because it can't just be a principal or a social worker. We'll be tearing their hair out. So we have to use the whole staff. We have to build their capacity. We have now a sensory room in some of our schools where students can go and if they bounce up and down on the trampoline, trampolines, that lets them get whatever they were feeling and they can reflect and then go back to a classroom setting. Sometimes it's sensory walls. Sometimes I saw in one elementary school patterns taped down on the floor where students walk, and it's a way for them to just get that little busyness out so they can focus on learning again. So I think the biggest answer to that question is looking at Tier 1 interventions and seeing how we can support teachers to implement things within their classroom.
Okay. Our next question, what is your position on Board of Education members' attendance at board meetings? If you believe it would help to meet one-on-one with members, does that excuse them from having to attend meetings without an excuse?
So, I know that all of you are busy. I know all of you have families, you have careers, you have obligations outside Waterford School District. So do I understand, that those things might trump a board meeting? Absolutely. If we are going to move Waterford forward, we need to have board members invested in working towards the same goals and with the same vision. And that means that you work together to hear each other's comments as well as perspectives. So in my opinion, if we are going to be most effective in moving Waterford forward, we have to work as a team, and that means when you are able, you're present.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I have a lot more questions, but I've been told that our time is up. So with that, I will give you the floor to provide a closing comment, closing statement before we finalize.
Thank you. This maybe ties into a little bit what Heather had asked. I cannot tell you how exciting my day was today. I enjoyed being in classrooms. I enjoyed getting to meet the people that really make a difference here. Waterford is lucky to have not only the community support, but the dedicated staff. The student talent is incredible. And I would feel very fortunate to be able to be part of this organization. So thank you for having me. Thank you to the audience. I know that you have a difficult decision. I trust your judgment and know that whatever decision you make, you have the best interest of one of our students. Thank you. Thank you.
With that, folks, we're going to have a 10-minute recess. So we'll recess the board meeting for 10 minutes, get a chance to stretch, get some water, and then we'll start our second interview in about 10 minutes.
You ready? Ready. All right. See how that goes? All right, sir.
Oh, yeah, I'm still there. Just teach first and fourth. Yeah, they added Korean to my schedule this year. So I was able to shift it. Our secretaries
I'll be here tomorrow.
Okay, that's how I speak Spanish, I've never done it.
Oh, really?
So it's this is the first interview. She seems like she's just wanted to know.
I'd imagine.
Probably along the line. You know, she did make a comment about.
So I
I'm third generation, yeah, so So apparently there's a right. Apparently they
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's like that, right? Just too long. This is all right.
Okay, does anybody need feedback forms, question forms before we get rolling here?
We'll get started, guys, in just about a minute. Okay, at this point, we will call the meeting back to order. I do want to remind everybody, if you asked a question or submitted a question last time, you will need to resubmit the question again. We won't ask that same one unless you want that question asked. So just resubmit it to Donna when she's around, and we'll get to that question again, time permitting. Our next candidate, of course, is Scott Lindberg. He is the current Assistant Superintendent of Administrative Services and Human Resources in the Huron Valley School District.
Welcome, Scott.
I have put together a suggested 90-day plan. It is completely up for revision if we are in the position, but it's something I wanted to pass out. I do have a couple of copies for the audience as well. So if you'd like to take any of these, remember this is just a suggested plan, so if you don't like something, don't take it.
Scott, welcome back. Today you had the opportunity to tour our district, visit some buildings, chat with students, stakeholders. Can you kind of give us a rundown of your day and what stood out about your experience today?
Well, thank you for having me back. I was very excited to get the call at 11:30 a week ago, and I couldn't sleep for a while then, so I was pretty pumped up. So thank you very much for the opportunity. Today's event and visitations in 9 different buildings was just exceptional. It's something that I like to do. It reminds me of being a principal and getting in and out of classrooms, and also at the central office level, getting into buildings, and that's so important. So throughout my day today, talking with various staff members, Lisa was real good moving us along. We had a schedule to keep. But just to see a tight-knit feel of a community. Talking with some of the folks tonight in the room next door, that just continued to support the fact that this is an exceptional community. We've got a wonderful foundation and just tons of potential. And so I saw that in every building. The facilities that I was at were just beautiful. The classrooms, I know in a couple of the buildings, they talked about specifically the academics and what was going on there. Central office meeting, the building visit was wonderful. Kingsley Montgomery, just miracle type work going on there. Stefanski is, as you know, the early childhood and all of the GSRP and the Head Start classrooms, just fantastic opportunities to give those kids a head start. So what a wonderful look at your district today, and it was just an awesome, energized day, so thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful. So you know, this is just kind of a impromptu discussion tonight. Everybody has questions. Somebody might ask 2 in a row. There's no set order. And we'll start out with anybody who'd like to get questions underway. John Paul.
Thanks for being here tonight. What is your definition of diversity or understanding of diversity? And how would you work to promote it amongst Waterford students and staff?
Well, the diversity can have to do with race, sex, economical conditions, any of those types of things. But the one thing that I've always been consistent about is you treat everyone fairly, no matter where they come from, and no matter how they look, how they live. That is critically important. That is a value that I know this district holds in high regard, and as do I. And we were talking, I think, with one group today that in the morning, we all put our pants on the same way. So everyone should be treated equally, be given the same opportunities as everyone. When we're talking about staff members, when we're talking about students, there's just no substitute for that. So when you're talking about diversity, that brings a strength to a community. So that's something that you can build on. It's good for students, it's good for the community, and it just brings about more opportunity to just live in harmony together and bring about great opportunities for all kids.
Well, that's my second. I think when you were here last week, you had talked about exit interviews, and it's important with teachers. So we know that. How do you feel if you were to get this position and people, as you came in and said, well, it's not how we do it here in Waterford? How would you react toward that? And then also, one of personally for me, biggest pet peeves has been our families who choose to continue to live in Waterford, but send their kids to Huron Valley, Walled Lake, Clarkston. Would you ever be interested in trying to figure out a way to do exit interviews with those families to where not just a letter can be sent to them, but calling them up and having a conversation or meeting with them, and they're under, their family and saying, why did you leave Waterford? What is it in the Southern District that, you like over Waterford?
Yeah, definitely. We need to have those conversations, and I have in the 90-day plan to initiate a review of analysis or to just create one, but we need to take a look at why those families are leaving. It's no different than what I did as an Oak Valley principal, that I would personally call families who maybe were choosing private school, different type of options, to listen to what they have to say. And so we can learn a lot from that. There's sometimes things we cannot change. Maybe we don't offer a certain type of education, certain sports program, but we should know that. Those are our stakeholders, and we want to be able to service all students. In regarding, if somebody says that's not how we do it, certainly it's very important to respect the culture that you come into. That's why very respectfully, I've shared this tonight, but a lot of things can change on this, given input of information. But you have to be careful. If someone says that's not how we've done it around here, well, then let's talk about that. Because if there's a better way, then let's do that. But if you're saying that's not how we do it around here, let's not bother. That's not continuous improvement. That's not building capacity. So we should be, as an administrative team, as a district, parents, community, be able to bring diverse views and opinions to the table so we can take a look at everything. And so that's very important. So talk to, I think it was with the students today, Kettering. It's good to have options. I'm very much an options person. And if you don't have the information, if you haven't talked with the folks, if you haven't done exit surveys, if you haven't talked to families who have chosen other schools, another district instead of this one, you won't know the information, so you can't develop different types of options.
Thank you. Eric?
You mentioned at your last interview that the Board of Age should model PLC behavior. Looking at data in a regular, meaningful way would be new to this board. So what does a board PLC behavior look like specifically?
Well, you need to have a shared common vision, and you need to have a collective commitment. You need to be results oriented, and there's got to be a way that you're going to, once you review the data, that there's going to be action. But it should be a collective inquiry, so that we're all taking a look at the same information. And I think at that point, the entire district, our instructional staff should know what we're looking at and what are our target points. So given the information and the data that we're going to be reviewing together, everyone should be on the same page. Now, it may not start out that way, but if we decide certain test scores or certain assessments are important, or if it's data for students who are choosing to be in different districts, we need to have some agreements on what we're looking at. But be able to have conversation. And again, differing opinions is good, because that will bring different options to the room. So a professional learning community is one that has commitments, has agreements on how they're going to do work together. And so it's, again, the shared mission, vision, and values. And that's some work that we may want to, if I was chosen, to take a look at in terms of our own professional learning with perhaps MASB, to say how are we going to do these processes before we dig into that data.
question, but given that you've provided us a very comprehensive 90-day plan, I'm wondering if you could maybe just spend a few minutes
Sure.
to talk through kind of what your thoughts are about what that first 90 days might look like.
Well, I think the first 90 days are critically important. And so I would say that as I put this together, I wouldn't guarantee that all of this would be completed in 90 days. But most importantly, I'd want to have a conversation in a meeting. I even suggested a 3-hour board retreat to take a look at this, because you may have some other priorities that would be important. But I focused it on a couple of different areas. One, the Board of Education. The purpose of that work, that focus work, would be establish a working relationship to support the focus, purpose, and direction of the Waterford Public Schools. So what are those things that we would be doing, those norms, those processes, those systems to move forward? The next large area would be a culture of learning and continuous improvement. I talked about that last time. If we're going to move our academic profile forward and our community forward and look for positive change, we need to decide what that's going to look like and make sure that we're all about learning. Continuous learning should just be for students or teachers. It should be for us as a team of 8, as the superintendent continues to learn and to lead that direction. So again, a purpose to align the entire organization around a culture of learning, professional learning communities. So then I have a number of items there. The next piece is media, communications, and marketing. That's important. I think we talked last time that if we don't tell our story, somebody else out there is, whether that's on Facebook or Twitter or the newspaper or the folks that work here. So we want to provide them the facts and the good news about what's going on. So this talks about how are we going to do that? Who would be the key communicators? Some of the research we would be doing. I would be very interested in getting right into reviewing the current partnerships that we have. I mentioned some that I've looked into, the Waterford Foundation, also one with the Waterford Township, the Waterford Coalition, and I know there's more. I think I'd be interested in how are we going to use media to refocus maybe a new purpose for us, a One Waterford, Together We Can, and really put positive pieces of information out there. And quite honestly, when negative things come up on social media or any of the venues, we need to have some way that we're going to address that. We don't want to get into going back and forth, in my opinion, but we need to be able to defend it and tell our story. If we don't, again, somebody else out there will. And then on the last piece that we've done some work, that I've done some work in Huron Valley, is we need to take a look at our legislative advocacy. I think we have an open window, specifically with the third bullet having to do with the School Finance Research Collaborative. I know our new governor is taking a look at how do we fund schools, how do we fund schools that have more need than some of the other districts, and we need to take a look at that, and we need to grow that knowledge. Maybe that's going on here, but I would want to continue that. But this legislative piece, I think, is critically important. The one piece that I did put on here, which I would also bring, is working in partnership in terms of legislative action and developments with the superintendent, Dr. Salah, in Huron Valley. We have, in a short order, put together an exceptional working relationship. And imagine if you form your coalition. Now we're not representing 9,000 students by ourselves. It's 18,000. And we have some of the same needs and interests here. So we really need to be thinking about how we're doing that, and this is the time. So that's why in the 90 days, I would suggest we need to get going on this and have some direction forward. It's imperative that we speak on the behalf of our students, and we have student need here, and it's been shown in the research collaborative that dollars are needed to support kids for their pathways and their opportunities. So we've got some strength, the doors have been open, we need to walk through them. So those are some of the things that I've put together.
Sure, Julie.
As superintendent of the Waterford School District, describe how you would retain teachers and improve staff morale.
So we're talking about staff morale. I think the first thing we need to look at is how we're going to get back to giving teachers the steps. Now that can look a lot of different ways. And I don't want to get too deep into this right here, but that is critically important. So I've been in human resources bargaining contracts over 30 in the last 6 years. There's options, there's analysis, collaborative work. When we sat down with a number of groups, we had very little money to work with, very little. But how do you look to retain your staff if you have nothing to offer them? So you can look at working conditions, you can look at the things that they're faced with day to day, but at the end of the day, our employees have to be able to support their families. So we have to take a look at that. And that means, how are we doing the finances? What are some of the options? And it's not just right now. Let's say we can't do anything right now. But what does it look like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road? I will tell you that as the executive director at the time of HR, I was putting together some plans with my team of what we possibly could do, and I would be talking with the board about those options. We talked about some of that work a year and 2 years before it happens. And you've got to have an innovative mindset when you look at contracts. So, in Huron Valley, I know the dollar value that teacher's schedule represents. It's many millions of dollars. So if someone was to come to me and said, well, we can't do this, we haven't done that before, that's a closed door, wait a minute. We've got 100, we got a 90 or $100 million budget. The teacher schedule represents that. Let's take a look. Let's stop and think about what options are there that we can do that. What are some other areas that maybe we have to pull back on in order to pay our staff? So the teacher morale, that's critical. I've heard that. The research has shown that. But the other piece is it's building a family, continuing to build that relationship that everybody's in this together. There's no dollar figure on that, but people want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And that's quite honestly one reason why I'm interested in being a superintendent. You really have to think about before you go into these positions, because there's a lot expected of you. I've talked with many stakeholders today. You can't answer everybody yes. You can't get everything done in a day. You work with a team and you do this, you delegate, but you come together and you move a system forward. Again, I'm part of a bigger family, and everyone else wants to be a part of that. I see some of the employees out there today. They want to be a part of something positive going forward. They take pride in their schools. I've talked to many people who have lived here their entire life. They graduated from these schools. So we can really tap that energy, and that'll be another way to retain and recruit, because positive word gets around. This is how we treat people in Waterford.
So we talked a little bit last time about all kids don't learn the same way, and all kids aren't necessarily interested in much of the academic portion. For some students, the best part of the day is the sports that they're involved in, or the arts that they're in, robotics, or all the various different things. And I'm just wondering if you could talk maybe a little bit about your experience in those venues and making those a priority, as well as the academic portion.
Well, I think if you take a look at a AAA district, and I know here in Valley that's been one of our taglines, but if you take a look at the academics, the arts, and the athletics, all three of those need to be developed. They all need to have their opportunities. And when you're taking a look at your STEM opportunities, when you're taking a look at the music and the arts, you need to continue to grow those programs, because like you mentioned, there may be some students that specifically come for those art classes. And as we know, art knowledge and experience and education is a way into the future. So those kids that may not be all academically inclined, we want to show them opportunities and say, hey, you've got to do these academics, but here's what's really driving your interest. They're pathways and ways to connect kids. Looking at the future, but you got to bring them in, and you've got to be able to offer those. I was very impressed with some of the limitations that we have in public education, all the options that Waterford offers their kids. And one of our goals, and I'm proud to say that as we got at this $4.5 million structural deficit in the last few years, we did that without taking away student opportunity. That was a commitment from everyone. And so those opportunities need to continue, we need to continue to look at them and make sure that we're growing those opportunities, every one of them, because you know as well as I do that kids, their success lies behind them having those types of opportunities throughout the days. So I agree with all of them. They're just fantastic, and that's really what school and education should be.
What are your thoughts on school of choice?
Well, I know there's been discussions here about that. I think you have to analyze all options. You have to take a look at what are the pros and the cons, where are the opportunities there. But you really have to see what are those, what are the different options that you can look at and have a collective decision. When you bring in schools of choice, we do that in Huron Valley. It works well for us. I know that we bring in more students than go out. But you have to also think about what that does to your community, and it needs to be a larger discussion than just what one person thinks, to be honest. And, but again, it's one of those options that we need to take a look at. I mean, I'm hearing from some stakeholders that they'd like us to do that.
If you were awarded this position, you would be new to Waterford, and you would also be new to the superintendent's. Can you maybe share with us what supports you would have in place in order to navigate the transition of that magnitude, and what additional supports you think would be needed?
Yeah. So being new to the community, you just have to immerse yourself in the schools, in the community. Just driving around today was very helpful. You need to be a part of the community. You need to bring your family to dinner. I bring my family to events, and you got to make your way out here. The supports that are important, I think, are MASB, Michigan Association of School Boards. You have MASA as a support. I've mentioned that I've already talked with our current superintendent about partnering with him. I'm well versed with the supports that Oakland Schools has. And so you really have to get out there and connect with people, and to be able, there's one superintendent in the district, so who am I going to talk to? You're going to want to call other superintendents who have been through some of the same challenges, and be able to talk with them about that. And so you want to make sure that you have those supports in place. And yeah, those would be the
Scott, getting to this point where we're at, obviously you've done research on the school district. What weaknesses do you see that we have here in Waterford that you feel, you coming in here, your expertise, that you can help us improve upon?
Well, when you take a look at the some of the academic profiles, some of the scores within that, I took a lot of time with the MSTEP. I think it's important to say, as we talk about MSTEP scores, it's about learning, it's about continuous improvement. So it's not really so much where we are, but you do have to analyze the numbers. And so you want to take a look at how tight are the scores across the district at the elementary, how tight are the scores at the middle school, and what do the SAT scores look like at the high school. But you want to look at all of your other programming and some of those strengths. So as you may be working in one area, there are certainly other strengths that you would want to highlight with the community. But we need to take a look and take a real dive, and I talked about those metrics that we would be looking at measuring, that we would want to bring about accountability from the superintendent on down. So that means we need to have the processes and the expectations of results in place. And, you know, if we think about it, kids are much more than just a test. I believe that with my own daughter. A personal note, I think sometimes we assess too often. So that's why I would say, which assessments are we going to look at? Which ones are we going to hold accountable and focus on those? I can tell you as a middle school principal, I did just that. There were times that we specifically at the time increased meet scores because we aligned our efforts, aligned the expectations, and I held teachers accountable, but also myself. Because being the lead learner, we're all in this together. So it was really working together to do that. It was the same thing on the Explore scores at the time in 8th grade. How can we improve and bring up the lower tiers? And I talked with the student group today, one of my favorite quotes from President Kennedy, a rising tide lifts all boats. So when you're taking a look through a professional learning community lens on the processes and things, systems that you have in place, when you improve those and tighten those up and everyone is on the same page, you're bringing up everyone. And that's what we saw. In the top quartile, the middle quartile, and the lower, we wanted to be bringing people up from those numbers. So we specifically were targeting strategies that would do that, and we were successful. It wasn't just me, it was a team approach. But we have to have a target, we have to know what results we're looking for, and there has to be accountability. Now, I would say if we missed the mark, and sometimes we did, that's okay too. It's just a number. If there's continuous improvement, and that's what I would want to say on camera for the community, continuous improvement is what we should have our focus on. We should be a learning institution. That means from everyone, from the superintendent, the team of 8 on down to our students, that we're continually learning and improving. So that would be the main thing. I would also talk about the relationships with the superintendent and the board and the community. Those need to continue to be strengthened, and look to see how we can lead this community and bring it all together. I'm talking with some stakeholders tonight. There's some real interest in some things that maybe we've missed, or some things that we can do a little bit better. And so that was the one thing I did learn today, that this community wants to come together and look at all of our resources to move things forward. There is a desire, which is just beyond ordinary, from the people that I spoke with today. So that is an exceptional attribute that you have in this community. So we've got to tap that. Now's the time, and to move it forward.
Kind of piggybacks on what you just stated. So my question is, how would you partner with others in our community, such as the township and the Chamber of Commerce and other major stakeholders here in our community?
Yeah. Well, just tonight alone, I had a couple of people come up to me and talk about ways that they want to support students, whether it's through social emotional, whether it's through different opportunities, whether it's through mentoring. So all of those different ways. In the township itself, we need to take a look at what are the things they want to offer us, and what can we offer them. So when we're out communicating, again, it's the power of one. It's the power of one Waterford. So looking at all those different connections. So I would want to set out as part of the 90-day plan is have those folks in and let's talk about it. And actually, I'd like to have a round table where we can all together, representing those areas, kind of kick around some ideas and some things that have worked, some things that haven't, and maybe some new ideas. So, and really that happens in the first 90 days. You start those relationships because we'll get busy and there'll be things going on. So that's what these areas that I've mentioned are things that we have to do in the first 90 days, at least get them started. So we work together and hear where their interests are and where they can help, and then where some of our needs are, and see what matches we can make.
So, piggybacking on that a little bit, so what happens when you're developing these relationships or working through some of your visions and goals when they don't align? What's your process when you run into impasse, just looking at come to an agreement? How do you handle that? What's your approach?
Well, it depends what it is. Sometimes there's issues that depending on what it is you want to, we could lose the fight to win the war. Those might be in contentious situations. But my vision may not be their vision, and whomever I'm talking with. So that's why it's very important, and what I've used again is what I said, you listen and learn, and that the first 90 days, see where we can make the connections. So maybe there's some small connections, some small victories. Maybe we can't get right where I'd like to be or where the board wants to be in the first 90 days, but you start the inroads on building those relationships, thinking 2, 3, 5 years down the road where we may be. And so you develop the trust and the transparency to open those doors for future opportunities. If things don't work out, working with people, we're not working with widgets. And that's the same thing with building relationships. And so you gotta listen and see where people are at and look for those win-win connective type opportunities. I know that they're there. And sometimes you just have to look for those opportunities. But sometimes it doesn't work out one day, and you go back and try it the next day. And I'll mention that we want to have that quality, that attribute of resilience. The same thing for our students. So the leadership should be no different. And when you get turned down, you don't take it personal.
understanding of growth versus achievement? And should the board pay attention to both or one over the other? And how would you have the board be informed of our students' growth and achievement?
So as I mentioned last time, we want to take a look at, the balanced assessment approach. I mentioned last time, I believe, we have to look at the M-STEP. That has to be something we look at because everyone else is looking at that. Our stakeholders, our parents, our communities. So we want to make sure things are lined up. In terms of student growth, the NWEA is an example that will show student growth. But if the student growth and the NWEA does not line up with the M-STEP, we need to take a look at that. Because our community, as far as I know, they're not looking at NWEA. So that's one sign in the classroom of how things are growing, but again, that's why you want to make sure that alignment is there. Some districts have done a shorter version of a curriculum audit to make sure that that's there. I don't know if that is something that would be valued. Maybe you've already done that. But you want to make sure that what the teacher's looking for in the learning, in the tests, the quizzes, the curriculum is lined up, your NWEA, your district benchmarks, and that M-STEP. So what we would need to do, which would be fair, I think, for our teaching staff, what scores are we going to start to look at? So we can give them a focus. I believe that sometimes teachers have so many things on their plate. You'll have the A+ type teacher, you will have a highly effective teacher, and will say, where do you want me to focus? And I did that with my own staff. And when you define that, what the benchmarks were to look like, what success looked like, we had a data wall that was set up, we would begin to move in that direction together. So that's a discussion I think is part of the 90-day plan. What are those things that we're going to look at? And we need to stay consistent. Sometimes teachers will say, we changed the cart. We changed too many times for them to really stay focused. And it takes time to put those things in place.
Can you give me talk through what the budget development process might look like if you were to be superintendent?
Well, we have a bottom line to hit, and we have a budget process, but I think budgeting happens all during the year. And so if you've got a fund balance of 8, 9, or 10%, that's looking good. What does that look like in the future? You need to keep an eye, and what you've done, and certainly in HR, you've got to keep an eye on your personnel costs. And where are those people needed? Where can we pull back? But you need to work with your budgets, with your departments and their budgets to make sure that they don't go over. And typically, that's not going to happen. But you need to have collaborative discussions at the superintendent's cabinet level, and that's what we've done. And if you need to pull back, you need to talk about, do we need to shift some more money in order to look at paying teachers first? Do you need to shift money when it gets to be bargaining time? An example that we had about a year and a half ago, we started reducing transportation routes for 2 reasons. Number one, we couldn't find enough bus drivers. I didn't really want to say that out loud, but that was true. The second thing is we had buses that were not full. We were not using the capacity. So I worked with the supervisor to reduce 11 positions, 11 full-time FTE positions. That brought us money to use in bargaining. My goal is I had to get rid of a 2-tier system in the transportation department because we couldn't find people to come in at that second tier. So that looked good and that worked for the budget, but we had to dig deeper. So sometimes an analysis needs to go to look deeper. But focus ultimately has to be on teacher and learning. One of the things I felt always as a principal, and I would say at the district level, teachers need to make sure that principals can provide the dollars needed for consumables, whether that's hands-on with the new science standards, or whether it's on math and manipulatives. We need to make sure that we're providing those dollars needed at the building level for them to make good decisions. So it's a multiple layered approach, but it comes back to me to be able to pay your staff and to provide the best teaching and learning opportunities possible. And so that is an ongoing process of looking at the budget. And again, you look at where you're at now and where you want to be in 12 months, 18 months, 3 years. There really needs to be a plan.
talk just a little bit, ask you to be a little bit vulnerable here about a time that you may have made a mistake or the first you wish you had, and what you learned from that experience and how that played out for you.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I certainly have made a lot of mistakes. I think one of the mistakes that I come close to making often is not wanting to take the time to listen to complaints or issues that are coming up. You know, we get so busy with our day-to-day, sometimes we just don't want to listen, take the time. And any time that I've done that, that's typically a mistake. So I've learned, to not do that. When we were bargaining once, we got going down a road in interest-based bargaining that was not going to work out. And I could see where we were going, and it was almost like a out-of-body experience. And I thought, wait a minute, we want to get this TA. This is not working. And I had to put the brakes on and said, we can't go any further today. We're going to have to stop this and analyze the numbers. So I guess what I'm saying, Heather, is that there's sometimes, thankfully, with my experience, I'm able to see that in the moment, and sometimes you just got to slow it down before you go too far into those situations that you cannot back out of. So I think my experience has helped me do that.
Thank you.
You touched a little bit about on the collaborative study and the whole focus of an equitable education versus equal. So how would you help children in Waterford, students in Waterford, get an equitable education?
Well, we need to look at a couple of different things. We need to make sure that we're talking with our legislative folks about this research collaborative study. That is a research collaborative that has been done that shows what we need for those students that are free and reduced in poverty, those that are EL learners, those that are in special ed, even those that get transportation. I mean, all of those types of categoricals, the research is saying there needs to be more money to look at that. And so in order to give everyone an equitable education, we need to continue to advocate for that. The second thing is what we can do and should be doing now, and I'm sure it's happening, is to make sure the supports are in place. So if you've got a building that has more need, let's say they've got an 80 or 85% free and reduced rate, you need to put those supports there. It may look a little bit different than another building with a much lower percentage. So you need to take a look at the population just like you would your own staff or kids, and look at where those needs are, and you have to apply them. So it may not be equitable across the system, but I read a book with my staff once, fair is not always equal. So we need to make sure that those supports are in place and make sure that they feel comfortable talking about them. But the way we're going to get there is we're reviewing the data, knowing your kids and what those needs might be.
In your interview last week, you mentioned a financial review committee that included teachers and community members. Can you describe the process and what that entails?
Yeah, so we were light on community members, but it really had to do with the unions, and so we started out with the teachers union, and so it's actually in our contract. We put that in the contract the last time, so we meet, I believe it's twice a year. FRC, Financial Review Committee, and again, it's almost an education, but it's a collaborative discussion that goes deeper than what's shown at the board meeting. So they can ask questions and they can feel comfortable about what's working and what's not. We also did that same type of meeting with the presidents of the other union groups. And so if we're all in this together and we have a $90 or $100 million budget, they should understand the big picture, the ins and outs. That we have millions of dollars that are locked into being able to spend on title programs that cannot be used for salaries, or these are the benefit dollars. And so, being transparent and showing and educating where we're at, that helps the whole situation. And so I've done that every time I've bargained, because if I come to the bargaining table and say, well, guess what? We don't have any money. What do you mean you don't have any money? You know, so the emotions get going. But so you want to give them the why. And that's the same thing you do with the community, with the bargaining groups, with the teachers in any situation that you're looking at. So that FRC has been incredibly productive. Where we started a few years ago, and some of those meetings were contentious, where they are today, they're 45 minutes, we come in, it's transparent, and it goes very well. But again, that shows the spirit of we're in this together.
Bob, what potential concerns do you have about this position?
Well, it's a big position, it's a big district, and it's a big change. However, I wouldn't have applied and I wouldn't have continued to come back tonight if I didn't know that I'm ready. I'm ready for the challenge, I'm ready for the opportunity. And you know, what I think about that, Rob, is I'm only one person. We're gonna work together as a team. That's the only way we're gonna get this done. If we don't work together as a team of 8, if we don't align our curriculum and our processes and systematize the things that we need to do, meaning if we don't do all of that together, I will not be successful, and we will not be successful. So I don't have any concerns, except I'm excited about the new learning and the new opportunities. And you know, as Heather was asking earlier, some days don't go well. That's just the way it is. You come back the next day and you persevere, but you work together with people, because that's the way we move systems forward. And what I saw today certainly confirmed what I already thought I knew, that Waterford is an exceptional district, has employees that are dedicated and committed, and they are eager to move things forward. And so that gives me no concern for pause at all.
Well, how do you work with 4 board members? I mean, because again, if you need to get something done, you need 4. My first superintendent told me that it didn't matter if it was right or wrong, as long as he had 4 board members. It upset me, but that's the day I started moving.
Well, 4 concerns me, because then they got 3 who don't agree with you. So, you know, sometimes you're gonna have votes, 4, 3, 5, 2, 6, 1. The 7-0 is the better way to go. But you're not always gonna get people there. It's not about, you know, just getting that best vote. It's about having those types of discussions. One of the things I put in the 90-day plan is what I would want to discuss with the board is what are the protocols for internal communications, committee meetings, what would those weekly meetings look like with the board president? Another piece I put in here, one of the things that's worked very well in my other district is we have a subcommittee approach that gives us an opportunity to talk about those things and to really dig into things that sometimes a board meeting doesn't allow. And board members, as representing the community, should be able to do that. You should feel free to really poke at some of the questions. We're in those committee meetings, which are open to the public, and that's important. And then what happens is those that aren't there, we have reporting out at every board meeting of what's going on in those committees. Those are also put in minutes that go around to the board every Friday in board notes. So again, it's very transparent, but it gives you an opportunity, Rob, to really get at those things that people might be wondering about, because you should be able, in my opinion, to ask those questions and sometimes push back, and because you are the elected officials of this school district. And I take that very seriously and with a lot of respect. So I would say, let's talk about what those processes would look like.
Thank you.
How would you improve social emotional supports and programming for students here in Waterford? And one of the things that about Waterford is we're a diverse community, a lot of socioeconomic differences depending upon where you're at, what neighborhood, and a lot of what we know about learning in classroom education is it is in the classroom, but also part of it is home environment. So one of the things that I would like to know is how would you support social emotional supports for kids?
Well, I'll tell you, I experienced that myself as an elementary student. My parents divorced, and so I very quickly went from where we were, middle income, went the other direction. And so I experienced it as a student, what I saw today in buildings, that you want to make sure you provide a safe, welcoming place where there are check-ins with students, where we need to know the personal stories of these kids that we work with. And that's a big job, but the support systems I believe that we have in place here and certainly in the district I'm at now allow us to do that, and we're expected to know those stories and be able to connect where those needs are. So schools should be the safest place they have. If they don't feel safe in this classroom, we know research shows that's going to hamper and cut back on their learning. One of the things that I've been very much about overseeing the food service department in Huron Valley is this grant that we went after and got for bringing breakfast into the classrooms for, I think it's 3 buildings for every student. So we know that if students, for example, come to school and they have not had a breakfast, within a half an hour, they're thinking more about how hungry they are than what's going on in the classroom. So those are some basic things that you want to take a look at and bringing kids in, that they feel safe, that you're meeting their needs. And this is a big job. I don't know if the community always realizes all that has to go on during the school day, but I will tell you that I saw this happening in your buildings today. Administrators who knew kids personally by name, I could tell they knew some of their stories. That happened throughout the district, so you're doing some of that. Can we continue to do better? I'm sure we can, and we're going to have to, because our kids coming into our schools, whether it's Waterford, Huron Valley, or Novi, they're coming in with more needs than they ever have. So that's why it goes back to take care of the staff and expect that they're going to take care of the kids, and that we will provide those supports in order for them to do that and to be successful. So you can't do that without a collaborative spirit, without discussions, and without stepping into the gap, which is what I've called it in the past. And we do that for our staff, we do that for our kids. When I was an Oak Valley Middle School principal, I think I mentioned it here last week, that we got the at-risk list down to the point where the principal knew the story behind every kid. We had counselor supports, we had mentoring supports, and we wanted to make sure that we were stepping into the gap for every student that needed it. And that is a full team approach. You can't do that without all hands on deck.
Scott, we have a question now from an audience member. The question is, many people in my subdivision select school of choice and attend Huron Valley schools. What will you do specifically to not only keep families in our district, but also re-engage families that have left?
I see that as an opportunity. And I'll tell you what I would want to do. I'd want to take one of the administrators closest to that middle school or the elementary and get somebody to open up their home, and let's have what I call a fireside chat. Whether they have a fireplace doesn't matter. But to have a discussion, we need to take a look at that. And get out there and put our best foot forward and start to change the narrative. That may take some time, but if we don't start, and I think that's a good place, quite honestly, for the superintendent to go into that community and talk about the good things going on. What questions can we answer about Waterford School, specifically the elementary school that's right here? That's why it'd be important to have the principal there with me. Well, let's start having the discussions. Again, if we're not out there telling a story, somebody else is filling in their own narrative, and we're not doing anything to get in front of that, we're missing an opportunity. So that is something that I would be passionate about, because as a superintendent, whatever district you're in, you're passionate, you know the things that are going on in those classrooms, you know the opportunities you have for kids, you want to get out and share that, and you do that face-to-face in that situation.
Next question. How important are one-on-one meetings between the superintendent and board members, and what will you do if someone refuses to meet?
I think the one-on-one meetings are important, but I would say even more important is the committee approach. So if somebody's not comfortable meeting with the superintendent, maybe you can maybe there could be 2 board members, maybe the board president sits in on that. But I'd want to dig a little bit deeper of what that issue is. But the committee approach is something that could get in front of it, because then it's not just one board member. I think the one-on-one meetings, as I've put, number one, is important with all the board if they're willing to in July. But you need to be able to have the collaborative discussions. We don't want to set up a situation where the perception is one or two board members as the superintendent's here more than the other. So the one-on-one meetings are important. The conversations, the phone calls, you want to over-communicate, but you want to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And that's a challenging opportunity for the superintendent, to make sure that they're transparent with everyone. Not one of you will want to come and think the other 6 has more information than I do. That will cause a problem on camera, in front of the community, at a board meeting, and that's not productive.
A long question. A reality of teaching in our schools today is that we are faced with very, very challenging behaviors that are inhibiting teacher and student performance, diminishing staff morale, and driving wonderful teachers and support staff away. What is your perception of the challenges teachers face on a daily basis, and how do you propose to support them?
As I mentioned, and we all know that many kids, our students or families are coming in with more needs than they ever have. So we need to take a look, and going back to John Paul's question about how we're going to address those. If we build relationships with kids, that will break down those barriers. You want to have your staff folks, whether you have positive behavior interventionists on staff, or you've got your counselors, or your coach, however you're going to use your staff to make sure that you're getting in front of some of those behaviors. One of the things that we had when I was a principal, we had a form, and if students were not meeting grade level content, they would have to fill out this intervention form. And one of the things we looked at is the student in a situation where it's academic or behavioral. So we would have systems in place and a team to say, hey, this is what we can do with these kids. You know, it's either is that they can't do the work or they won't do the work. And sometimes the behavior situations are can't. So you got to make connections with those kids. And if you have systems that are set up, like I did when I was principal, you start to lower the number of those kids that are at risk, and then you can really focus on those that need the intense, perhaps restorative practices with the counselors or outside agencies. That's where some of these community opportunities come in. So we need to have all of the opportunities and all of the supports in place. That's the one thing I don't know if we've tapped all that we can, and we're going to need that. It has to be a collective community working together.
Scott, you mentioned accountability from the superintendent on down. How do you propose to measure our leaders and leadership in Waterford as closely as teachers and instruction?
Well, I've been used to in Huron Valley. I've had personal and critical goals every year I started there since 2001. I tend to like goals. I think you like to have stretch goals. You have to like to have goals that you can meet with putting certain things in place. And I do that with all of the supervisors now that I directly oversee because it sets a target. So the accountability is you're working, you want them to be successful, but if you don't have a target, imagine how busy we get every day. We get away. I mean, the happenings, the day-to-day business, we get focused on the management and not the leadership. So what are those goals that we have? And all of those goals would align some way to a district strategic plan. So you want to have alignment from the superintendent and the board all the way down. So you're working together, all in the same direction. So the accountability comes as we're working on the direction together. And you're building people's capacity. And again, they feel pretty good when they've hit those goals. And there's going to be a time or two where they haven't met them, okay? So what I say is, let's talk about the data that you have. What did you not meet, and what are the next steps? It's continuous learning.
Scott, in your opinion, what is the board's role in hiring and firing staff under the superintendent?
My understanding and what I've learned is that the board, unless you have different policy on this, the board hires and fires one person, and that's the superintendent. However, if there are issues that the superintendent's not taking care of, and I've experienced this, then you're going to get the board involved because the board members are going to hear things from the community. So if there are issues, you would expect as board members that the superintendent and his leadership team would take care of those issues. So it's probably not a healthy situation to have the board step in and talk about the hiring or firing. of those situations. But again, the superintendent needs to respect where the board's at, their commitment, and what they expect from their staff.
What is your ideal opinion of the ideal board?
That's a good question. Let me check my notes. Ideal board member. I think an ideal board member is one that takes representing their community seriously, one that is about success for everyone, every student, and every staff member. And as we do as students, if we can't find the right pathway, then we find different options. It's the same thing with staff members, right? So the ideal board member would expect from the superintendent down that we're moving the district forward. I mean, that's what everybody wants. They want to be a part of a successful team. The board is, from what I've seen, and I've worked very closely with this board the last 6 years, it typically should be about the what, not always about the how. And so that's the important piece, because you come from varied backgrounds, and board members have a lot to offer, but they don't always know the day-to-day operations. But they should expect that when there are problems, when there's gaps, when there's shortcomings, that those things would be addressed. And if the superintendent's addressing them, then you get to keep your hands clean, and it's on the superintendent and their team. And I think typically that's the way board members want to look at things.
Any questions? I have no other audience questions, board member questions. So I'm going to ask you one.
Yeah. Well, so, over the last few years, we've created a STEM program, Advanced Achievement Program. I know Fair Valley has the IB program.
Yes.
And so, what are your ideas on increasing programs that will help change the district and move it forward in a more academic setting?
We need to make sure that we're offering our kids all those opportunities where they can get the college credits, the early college, the AP courses. You need to make sure, again, that you're lifting up all of those kids that are at the higher end, that they have those opportunities that anybody in any other district would have. You work with the local universities, but what I've seen successful are internships, the AP programs, and that early college, and giving them those types of opportunities.
Can you tell me about a time when you had to change something of great magnitude or of significance? And speak through what your thought process was, what your share of visionary message, and how did you approach it?
I can think of two, but the first one that comes is when we changed the evaluation process. And as Lansing put it, and this I'm talking for the teachers, that was all taken out of their hands. And so what we did is we set up a process that was not as collaborative and that was not as visionary as needed to be. And I think I mentioned last time, one of my learning opportunities was we were kind of tripping over each other. Things were not working. And so that's when we sat down with, I was given the opportunity to meet with about 85 EA teacher members and to really talk about what was working and what wasn't. So I think that's an example where Lansing had said, well, they're not going to have anything, teachers are not going to have anything to do with the evaluation process. They don't have a say, it's not in the contract, and we're going to do this to them. I'm here to say that I learned that I was going along with the way that I thought we should be doing it, but I was wrong in that not including the teachers through that entire process. And so that's when we put the ERC, the Evaluation Review Committee, together, where they have a lot of input and they know what's working and what's not. So we learn to make adjustments, and again, that's a committee that meets twice a year. And so it's kind of a touching base, what's working, what's not, but that's going so much better. And what I developed out of that vision and grew is that the evaluation process is about mentoring, about coaching, about giving teachers opportunities. It's very clear that I would talk with the administrators in the law that yes, it may be easier that we can dismiss teachers, but that's not the way we should go about business. Should be about talking about what we would do with our students and how do we build their capacity and put the supports in place. That's in the law. And that's where the real work happens. But we don't have teachers lining up at the universities to come into teaching. It's tough work. So we need to make sure we're taking care of the staff that we've got. So out of some of the missteps, a real concrete vision grew, and any administrator you would talk to would know that that's what I'm about.
Well, Scott, unfortunately, our time is up for questions. So at this point, I'd like to ask if you have any closing statement or final comments you'd like to make.
Yeah, I would like to know if anybody would like to answer, what is an ideal board member?
You're looking at something.
Who asked that question? That was good. No, all kidding aside, I would like to hear maybe a little bit from the board, really what are the top 3 things that you're looking at right now? What are those things that have to be focused on immediately?
Hiring a superintendent.
Okay, well, I can help with that tonight. Number 2. I know that's like collaboration.
I think one of the important things I think to all of us is, keeping our staff informed financially. Doing a lot more with less than we have, so.
Learning to get better and better, aren't we?
I'd second that and say that, how do we give our staff increases? In the face of losing students and fiscal adversity. So, and I think that one of the other important things is us looking at a long-term strategic plan for our district and where we will go from here in the next few years.
Agree. I'm all for those comments.
So we talked about some of those things, and that's, I've had success in all those areas. That's why I come back to Rob. This position is one that I'm very comfortable accepting. I wouldn't be here interviewing in front of you and spend the day. I look forward, if I was given the opportunity to work with you to do those things and more. And, so it's the kids that we service and the families that we serve count on it, and that's we make a difference. And I saw that happen in the buildings today. The difference makers in the lives of these kids. I can tell you, so we've got some things to work on. Every district does. I shared that last time. But the good things and the teaching and learning that's going on in your schools right now in Waterford are exceptional. There are miracles going on in these classrooms. And again, I don't know if in public education we share those stories enough. And that's I know that Keith has done that. We need to continue to build on that and share the good news with everyone that we're going to be about all kids learning, no matter where you come from, no matter where you're going, the higher level opportunities that we're going to provide, the supports we're going to give for all kids to be successful, and that I know is going to be our commitment every single day.
Thank you, Scott. We appreciate it.
Time for feedback forms.
Thank you. I'm going to come around.
Thank you.
So folks, we're going to take at least a 20-minute recess. There's copies of feedback forms that need to be made. We as board members need to review that. So you know, as we recess, we will not be discussing any of our decisions. It would be in violation of the Open Meetings Act. We are going to grab something to eat and drink, and then we will be back here 20 minutes or so, and we will go into deliberations and start speaking about the interviews tonight. So we will recess for about 20 minutes.
Sam, like that. How long have you been there? About 8 years. Yeah, she walked. Yeah, she said she walked here. Lived since before that. Lived forever. That's why it's back. I so bad wanted to start on how good it was. I guess